One of my favorite things about RBY is that Pokemon don't have many coverage options, or at least not many good coverage options. As each new generation comes into existence, then Pokemon's move pools expand, they have more and more coverage options, and this, in combination with all of the options for power increasing they have as new generations come into play, items, natures, split EVs, abilities, weather, it can be hard to check Pokemon that are not only strong but have a lot of coverage to boot. And the foremost example of every Pokemon, almost every Pokemon, being able to use coverage to great effect to make themselves way more difficult to answer is, of course, Hidden Power. And one of the good things Generation 8 did for competitive, in my opinion, was the removal of Hidden Power. I'm not going to call it like a purely random move, but it is pretty crazy how Hidden Power takes certain Pokemon that normally would be pretty reasonable to answer, and even though it's a weak move, 70 base power Gens 2 through 5 and 60 base power in Gen 6 and 7, even with the move not being very strong and not being stabbed most of the time, then it still will make a lot of Pokemon really difficult to handle because it can be any type. Well, besides Hidden Power Fairy in Gen 6 and 7, but it can be any type, and that's just the perfect complement that a lot of Pokemon need for their coverage. So we're going to be looking at some outstanding users of Hidden Power. So we start in Gen 2, and the foremost example is Zapdos, and of course Raikou as well. And dealing with the electrics is already hard enough with the existence of ground types, but with Hidden Power, then suddenly they can hit the ground types, and even they're not safe. And you're really not safe against Zapdos because the ground types can't even Earthquake it. But with Hidden Power Ice and Hidden Power Water, the ones they most commonly use, then it's incredibly difficult to deal with them. Because Zapdos is very difficult to truly counter outside of Raikou, Snorlax. Both of those can be shaky, but for the purpose of this, they are our truest counters. Blissey, of course, and then certain ground types that aren't weak to Hidden Power Ice. Steelix does an okay job. Piloswine is used pretty much just because it answers Thunder HPI Zapdos. And Quagsire is sometimes used on rare occasion because it walls even HP Water variants of Zapdos and Raikou. It's tough to handle both. And HP Water variants, of course, there aren't many grass types, and not being able to hit Exeggutor isn't great, but Zapdos also has Drill Peck, so a lot of HP Water sets go with Drill Peck, and then Exeggutor can't wall it, neither can Steelix, and Golem and Rhydon are similarly helpless, not that they were great against HP Ice to begin with, and things like Nidoking just can't stand up to it reliably either. So one of the reasons Zapdos is such an overwhelming force is because dealing with Thunder is hard enough with spikes down, and then even the one type that's immune to it can't really answer it reliably. And of course, Ice also hits grass super effectively, so you really got to outbulk Zapdos most of the time, or a combination of pivoting around, which of course doesn't work too great because that makes you take more spikes damage. And there are no spikes immune Zapdos answers, because the only Pokemon that can take, unless you count Light Screen Zapdos of your own, which is unreliable, even on a good day. But there's nothing else that can really take both Thunder and HP Ice with spikes. Dragonite would not be a great answer, but it wouldn't be the worst thing in the world. In a pinch, I guess, if you really need to avoid damage elsewhere. But nope, because HP Ice just destroys it. Same with Gligar, who is, of course, immune to Electric, but nowhere near an answer to even HP Water Zapdos. And so the options aren't fantastic, and that's why Zapdos is such an overwhelming Pokemon, such a limited pool of true answers to it. So Raikou is more manageable because it's at least weak to Earthquake and Spikes, and it has lower physical defense. But it's still really tough to deal with, especially because it commonly uses Roar. Zapdos sometimes uses Whirlwind as well, but not as commonly. And with Sleep Talk, then it's really tough to deal with these pokes because you can't even pivot into them reliably. Because they might pull a Hidden Power on your ground or a Thunder on your Lax, so it's tough. Raikou commonly runs Ice too because one of the things about Hidden Power in Gen 2 is that it messes with your IVs, or DVs as they were known back then. So as you see here, Zapdos, HPS is the best one because it just knocks your defense down a little bit and everything else goes untouched. But here you see what Water does to you, knocks down your HP, most notably. So it's a big difference. Like, HP Fire is really, really bad. We'll see that in a second. But yeah, it's usually worth it because it's so hard to deal with. And when either of these electrics is using a phasing move and suddenly they're dragging in ground types like Golem and Nidoking and then forcing them out again because the ground types they risk just getting KO'd by them. So Hidden Power, Raikou and Zapdos were considered so overwhelming at one point that they were just banned. Or they weren't banned themselves, but they were banned from using Hidden Power. So yeah, that's that rule hasn't been in place for like over a decade now, but it was that was how overwhelming they are. Even with Snorlax being ridiculous and all, then it was just nope. These guys are crazy hard to deal with. So that's them in a nutshell. Now Exeggutor, we're going to take a look at HP Fire. So Eggy is normally with its Grass Psychic coverage, then it is walled by things like Skarmory and Fortress. And of course itself, but Jinx. Well, it's not really walled by Jinx, but Giga Drain does nothing. But with HP Fire, then you have a great coverage option and send all of them packing. 3 attacks Egg is highly underrated, and you can throw in Sleep Powder over Giga Drain or something. But you see here that HP Ice's speed, or sorry, not speed. HP drop is huge because look at what Eggy's base HP usually is. 393, and you go all the way down to 369. That's crazy. And a defense drop, although that one doesn't come into play as much. But it's nuts. So yeah, HP Fire comes at a steep cost. But even with the steep cost, I mean, it's not as overbearing a Pokemon as the Electrics, but it can be very difficult to deal with. Simply with this little addition to its coverage, 70 base power in the bulkiest generation where everything has Rest Talk and maxed out defenses and leftovers, still really tough to deal with. That's how important coverage is. That's another way to sum up why Hidden Power is good. Coverage is important. So, yes. Cloyster sometimes runs HP Electric, literally just for other Cloyster. Literally. Because every other scenario, then, feasibly against the rare Tentacruel, okay, HP Electric isn't bad, but Toxic, you usually want Toxic. And look at Cloyster's normal HP, which is really big, because it needs it to handle Snorlax. And with Hidden Power, Electric, then you go down to 287. Yikes, and you even have a slightly weaker Explosion. So it's not as common as Toxic as people like the bulk and the Toxic against Lax, but some people on fast-paced teams, they really want that edge in the Cloy-on-Cloy matchup because it is a really common one. Cloy comes in on your Lax, they're going to spike, so you go to your own Cloy to get up your own spikes, you match that. So yeah, it's definitely a good option, even though it makes you worse against Lax, but that's how big Cloy-on-Cloy can be. Fortress, yeah, terrible special attack. Still, sometimes it runs, traditionally it's run HP Bug to handle Starmie, so its main selling point for a while was to be a spiker that kept Starmie out of its face, unlike Cloyster. Another reason Cloyster prefers Toxic, by the way. So HP Bug because it stab and it hits Starmie. That hasn't been used in a long time, though. It's not really very good besides that. It also checks Eggy, but you can perform similarly without HP Fire, of course. You can perform similarly with HP Ghost, which also turns you from completely walled by Gengar to threatening Gengar, which is quite nice. It doesn't do as much. It does decent damage against Missy. So there's that. So you have HP Ghost, and sometimes even HP Fire. Literally just for other forays, because otherwise you're going to, depending on your team, you might need to chase down other forays so you can keep your spikes up, so you can keep their spikes off. Like the combination of HP Fire plus a Pursuiter for Ghosts is a classic, so you're covering everything. Lots of great coverage options. Fortress is not a special attacker, or so you thought until it pairs HP Fire and Giga Drain to win the Spikes game against other forays and Golems and Cloysters. Pretty funny. Yeah, it's even with such low base power, that's how important coverage is, and it all stems from Hidden Power Fire. Now, of course, the HP Fire bulk drop on Fori is so painful, but sometimes you just you need it on certain teams. Getting the advantage against other 4 is really big. It also lets it actually check Steelix instead of just letting it set up curses infinitely, which is surprisingly useful. But most of the time, you're just using it for other 4Es. And HP Ghost is much better if you can afford it. I mean, sometimes 4E doesn't use hidden power at all, but I mean, the bulk drop still isn't great, but it's not the worst thing in the world. So, then there are some other cases, like Gengar sometimes uses hidden power, like water or grass, but I'd really like HP Water, but it's not really a standard. And cutting into Gengar's already low bulk. Sometimes you're like, oh, it doesn't really matter that much, and sometimes you're thinking, man, I really wish I could live that Thunder right about now. So there's that. And of course, hidden power is either physical or special in Gens 2 and 3 based on what type it is. So, like, the best way to remember the physical special split for those unfamiliar is Evolutions and Dragon are special. Everything else is physical. So the Evolution, besides Eevee, of course, Eevee itself is normal, and that's physical. But, you know, Flareon, Vaporeon, Jolteon, Espeon, Umbreon, Glaceon, Leafeon, all those special. That and Dragon. And everything else is physical. So it's physical. Physical being relevant is good for HP Ghost on 4E, because if it was special, it would be doing nothing to the Ghosts. And HP Bug, you know, even though it doesn't really use that. HP Ghost is also good so it can check Jinx, for example. But even though spiking and spinning in Jinx's face is often good enough. But you get the idea. So physical hidden power as an offensive tool is good because Cursed Machamp commonly, or more commonly in the past, used HP Bug to do things like beat Poison Starmie and Exeggutor, back when Eggy was a lot more popular, because not much handles, Cross Chop and Rock Slide, but Eggy shrugs it off really nicely. In more recent years, it switched over to Earthquake as things like Gengar and Nidoking have become more prominent. And, the safer hit on Raikou is nice as well. But HP Bug was a staple on Machamp for a long, long time, as you see here in its popular moves. So that's another example. HP Ghost has also sometimes been used on certain teams that really need to destroy Misdreavus. I mean, destroying Gengar is fine, but if it was just about destroying Gengar, you'd use Earthquake. So HP Ghost is to really lock into Misdreavus while maintaining that hit on Poison Starmie. So it's a good in-between. And it's crazy how it can kind of... I mean, the bulk drop is not fantastic on things like HP Ghost, but the coverage is just that important. And it can really make an already dangerous Pokemon so much more dangerous to deal with. And sometimes Machamp has historically even run HP Flying, believe it or not. It also hits Exeggutor pretty well, like so does HP Ghost, but its main target is Heracross. And HP Flying's bulk drop is bad, but beating Heracross is really big for some teams, because Heracross is one of the most reliable answers to most Machamp. So, yeah, hidden power is a big, 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 big deal. Marowak has historically run HP Bug on Swords Dance 3 attack sets as well. Again, just for Egg. Most of the time, it hasn't really made great use of it, but, or rather, nowadays, it doesn't really make use of it very much. And in the past, it was more, oh, well, I also need to hit Egg. If it's paralyzing, great, you OHKO it, but most of the time, it was just kind of a bonus. Nowadays, players generally prefer Fire Blast, which also hits Egg pretty nicely, but also lets Marowak actually handle Skarmory, and being able to instantly threaten Fortress is great as well. So, HP Bug is more or less a relic on Marowak at this point, unless you're on Baton Pass teams. But yeah, it also used it. Nidoking doesn't use it much, it really needs its bulk, and it already has amazing coverage. Flamethrower, Ice Beam, Thunderbolt, whatever you need. Surf. Yeah. Fear has used HP Fire Skarmory in the past just to surprise Fortress. And it also handles Steelix, which can be kind of annoying for Skarm before. Now, I'm not saying that's a standard, but I'm saying, look how important HP Fire, or how important Hidden Power can be, even on something like Skarm that really wants the bulk. King of GSC, Snorlax never uses Hidden Power because it has amazing coverage, and also it doesn't want the bulk drop, but mostly it has its coverage. It doesn't need to HP Ice when it has Ice Beam, for example. Starmie doesn't use a Steelix, Suicune, not really, T-Tar, Umbreon. HP Fire Umbreon has been used like HP Fire Skarmory on very, very, very rare occasions, but that's more or less it. And we've already gone over Zapdos, and Vaporeon has used HP Electric on a couple offensive growth sets in the past, but it's usually a waste. Usually it'll be better off like subbing or baton passing or acid armor or something, even on offensive hydro sets. So, or even Protect. So those are the most notable users of Hidden Power. Nothing else. Okay, Espeon uses HP Water on its Growth Sweeping set. That's a big one. Jolteon as well, but that's just another electric. So yeah, that's pretty. Espeon has also sometimes used HP Fire, but it usually prefers Water because it also hits Tyranitar, and so it's a little worse against Skarm, but not usually a big deal. So I personally love when I can use Espeon without Hidden Power at all, because I don't like any of the DV drops, because I really like its ability to take hits. It's deceptively tough to take down, especially with that speed stat and maybe even Morning Sun, but sometimes the coverage is necessitated. So that's basically it. If you use Moltres, only use Sunny Day, Fire Blast, and Rest Talk. Don't get tempted into HP Grass. It is a waste and a half. Scizor, HP Bug. It's the strongest stab in Gen 2 and Gen 3. Actually, Silver one's weaker in Gen 3, but yeah, it uses HP Bug, so that's hilarious. I've also seen a bulky SD Morning Sun HP Fighting Return set from Conflict, which was interesting because you have that super effective coverage on Lax, and you can actually touch Skarm at +2. But yeah, it's interesting, but an option. And nothing else really worth mentioning, because once you get to UU, then you're not really getting to stuff. Without going into UU itself. So that's GSC for you. We're going on to Gen 3. So a lot of stuff starts hidden powering, because we're going to just take out all these pokes and start from scratch. Because now Hidden Power is in its more well-known form, where it doesn't completely ruin your DV or your IVs now. Take, for example, the classic example of HP Flying Aerodactyl. See, it's got... Well, okay, we're just going to give it Rock Slide first, just so it has a... Okay, so see, it's got those perfect IVs, and then we're going to give it a Hidden Power, and we're going to give it... It uses HP Bug a lot, but HP Flying was the standard, so... And now, look, it only... I mean, HP Flying is still costly, but it's... now, it weakens more stats across the board, but it's not a severe drop. And you can even toy around with what you want to drop. Like, there's an HP Flying spread. You know, if you want to minimize speed so you underspeed things, or you have low confusion damage or foul play damage, you can do that. Or a combination of both. But otherwise, you want to max stuff out, right? And this handy-dandy tool gives you the optimal tools for what you want to do. Like, if you don't... Like, if you're using Salamence, whose strongest flying stab is HP Flying, then you would sometimes not want to run max speed if you're running an Adamant Band set, and thus you would run this set with max attack, and because if you're running bulk, then it's better. So you gotta, crunch some stat numbers in the calc to get the best use out of your Hidden Power, so you're not just needlessly wasting stats. But it's much better than the huge irrecoverable drops that you had before. Also relevant because everything nothing has max EVs anymore. So Hidden Power, and also Hidden Power is now stronger thanks to, well, it's effectively stronger with things like Sandstorm. Well, defensive play is tougher to pull off in general because more residual damage and more power boosting options. So setup moves, Choice Band, even Weather on occasion. Not that Sun HP Fire or Rain HP Water is particularly common, but it's setting the precedent for later on. So, common HP users in Gen 3. So we've got your classic Choice Band Aerodactyl, Rock Slide, Earthquake Double Edge. Traditionally, it used HP Flying because it was just another good stab, had some great super effective coverage against things like Celebi and Heracross. In more recent times, it started using Bug, simply because A, it hits Celebi harder, and that's really big, especially if you're trying to stop a baton pass or something. And B, well, the super effective hit on Claydol is also surprisingly useful, but it's more that Bug has great neutral coverage. And for example, when you have HP Flying and you try to hit Celebi, then T-Tar can come in and pursue you. But when you have HP Bug CB Arrow, then you can aim for Celebi and still smack a T-Tar trying to switch in. So most people don't really try that anymore. So it's become the more prominent coverage on Arrow. Recently, we've also seen an influx of HP Fighting Arrow. And you think, oh, come on, that's excessive. But the reason is that HP or that Earthquake doesn't kill healthy Tyranitar, and HP Fighting does. So when you need Arrow to outspeed that +1 DD Tar, you also need it to actually KO it, or it's going to DD a second time and sweep your team. In those scenarios, you have HP Fighting. Also, extra power against things like Snorlax is cool, especially because it's unexpected. So yeah, that's Arrow and its hidden power fun for you. Keep in mind that HP Fighting does not let you have a 31 speed IV, so you will not be tying with other arrows. So in that situation, just give yourself some bulk. See, HP Fighting IVs, there's no option for 31 speed, so you just go down to, Doug speed or something. And now you can out-survive like a Milo Surf or something like that. Playing the calc, it's good for you. So, Blissey does not really run hidden power. We're going to be cursory with a lot of these mentions because I might try uploading this to Spotify, by the way, because this is definitely more of a podcast. We're going to be cursory with a lot of these because there are a lot of hidden powers going on. So Blissey has used HP Grass on rare occasions, or not so rare occasions in the past, but it's hard to fit nowadays. Wouldn't really recommend it. I mean, it's okay when Calm Mind Bliss was all the rage, but if I were to use HP Grass, I would use 3 special attacks now. Breloom can use HP Bug or Ghost, and it can be irritating, mostly because its answers are things like Celebi, Claydol, Gengar. So if you are going to use it, then I would recommend pairing it with Stun Spore, because Stun Spore hits everything, and it is much better to Stun Spore whatever you think is switching in after you've spored something, as opposed to just predicting with HP Ghost, because HP Ghost into like a Salamence is really bad. But Stun Spore, if you Stun Spore like a Claydol or a Celebi, you can hidden power them after that, and you don't need to hit them on the switch most of the time. Stun Spore is just good in general, so I wouldn't use hidden power without Stun Spore. Oh, some people have also used HP Grass Breloom, and it's funny because it's its strongest special attack. Well, it's its strongest Grass Stab, and its Grass Stab is always special in this gen. And it's actually surprising because after Sleep, then Swampert is actually a pretty great Breloom answer because non-Focus Punch doesn't do very much, and Ice Beam hits hard. So some people actually lure Swampert with HP Grass Breloom. It's hilarious. It's still really weak, but you can do it. Speaking of HP Grass for Grass Stab, then you have Celebi. Celebi uses HP Grass on defensive sets because it is stronger than Giga Drain, and the extra power is really big against Dugtrio. Of course, you can use Giga Drain, but you would generally recommend Giga Drain to be used if you're also using HP Fire. I mean, the recovery from Giga Drain is nice and all, but 8 PP is not great. 60 power is pretty low. And you generally will prefer the extra power of HP Grass against other targets like Suicune and Tyranitar. So that's Celebi for you. Claydol doesn't really use hidden power. Well, it's used hidden power sparsely in the past on HP Fire back when Flurry was all the rage, but nowadays I wouldn't bother. Most people don't. Pretty much no one does. Cloyster has used HP Grass sparsely, mainly since it switches into offensive Swampert a lot, and offensive Swampert thinks it has the freest focus punch ever as Cloyster goes for spikes. And when you have HP Grass, then you can actually surprise chunk that Swampert real hard and open things up for your arrow late game. Yeah, lots of advanced teams have multiple hidden power users per team. It's crazy. Now that I really think about it, yeah, so HP Grass is the only one really used on Cloyster. Everything else not really. Dugtrio you never see without HP Bug because part of its niche is that it traps Celebi thanks to HP Bug. Yup, it's crazy. So that's pretty much all there is to that. I mean, it's not like Dugtrio has a great move pool, besides EQ and Aerial Ace for Heracross. I mean, the other stuff is mostly just filler stuff. But, I mean, now you would use Beat Up, so in the last slot, but Rock Slide was used before. But HP Bug, you never go without it. The only exception I can think of is when Veteran in Love, on an old team, he used HP Ghost Dugtrio because it baited and smashed Gengar that thought they were safe, and I thought that was really cool. But that was on a team which destroyed Celebi from every angle. Most teams are not going to be like that, so. Flygon commonly runs HP Bug itself for the same reason. Hitting Celebi is really good, hitting Claydol is really good. Complements its Earthquake Rock Slide coverage perfectly. It's also used HP Ghost rarely because Gengar seems to be the safest place in the world for it to switch in, and it's nice there. especially on Choice Band, although not necessarily, especially because Ghost hits Claydol just as hard. And if you're not super pressured by Celebi, then I would even say, yeah, go for Ghost. It's also used HP Flying on Band before. McMegan used to use that a lot, but then it was discovered that it was better to use HP Bug on Band and Gust as your flying move to hit Heracross. So, which is pretty funny. So yes, HP Flying Flygon is in fact outclassed by Gust. That's funny. For the same HP Bug thing, except now it can use HP Bug and HP Ghost and HP Fire without the bulk drops, which is really, really nice. So, HP Fire Fortress was really popular when Fori was all over the place. It started seeing usage again. Something else I should mention while I'm at it is that all forms of hidden power are counterable in generations 2 and 3. Like, even if you use HP Fire, which is a special hidden power, then that can still be countered. So don't mirror code it, counter it. So Fori, HP Bug, Ghost, Fire, same exact thing as in GSC, but with more bulk advantages. And it likes HP Bug more for Claydol now as well. And it's pretty strong against T-Tar. Ghost is nice because, again, the Gengar thing is even more prominent in this gen, and the Fire thing is just Fori on Fori. It doesn't use it for Steelix as much anymore. Gengar usually uses Giga Drain as its, or used to anyway, used to use Giga Drain as its one of its coverage options. Make things like it can't be walled by Swampert and it hits T-Tar really hard, and then some people started using HP Grass. So, because the power is just a huge step up. I mean, the recovery is nice, but the power is really big, you know, trying to just destroy Swampert, trying to Torrent Hydro Pump you, T-Tar trying to Pursuit you, just good in general. So HP Grass Gengar, that's all it really needs because its coverage is fantastic. And it's another example of, as the generations go on, then, you know, you get all these Fire Punches and Ice Punches, and then the special variant. Some Pokemon lost it when the Generation 4 brought about the physical special split. Like, you don't see Fire Punch Gengar anymore in Gen 4. But, yeah, that's the basic idea. Gyarados uses HP Flying as its Flying Stab, which is amusing. But it can also use HP Rock. And then it goes without Physical Stab, which is sad. But HP Rock is big because it smacks Zapdos real hard and it hits Arrow, too. So, yeah, that's pretty simple. Heracross sometimes uses HP Ghost because a lot of teams are, you know, even if their Gengar doesn't have Fire Punch or Explosion, then they generally don't have anything else to take Mega Horn and Fight moves. And with HP Ghost, mostly because Heracross can afford it. So with HP Ghost, then you really just slam Gengar trying to go one-on-one with you. Like with Guts, then it can't even Will-O-Wisp you. And it usually won't even try. I mean, if it does, it's for the residual damage. But you ensure that it can't... With HP Ghost, you ensure that it can't Will-O-Wisp you for the residual damage and then Thunderbolt you after. And in Sand, you're pretty much already dead. So they actually got out of it pretty safely. And with Rock Slide, they will be doing that. But if you don't have a Rock Slide because you can HP Ghost it, then it's easy. Jirachi loves Hidden Power. It uses Grass a ton on its offensive Calm Mindsets. And for the coverage on Swampert and T-Tar. And on other sets, it's dabbled with HP Fighting quite a bit. I mean, there have also been some fringe options like HP Water, but that's mostly that's very rare and very specific. And most of the time, you're going to be HP Grass on offensive sets, and sometimes even utility sets. But mostly like utility and like mix sets often slot in HP Fighting because it turns T-Tar from, you know, anti-Jirachi option to, you know, Jirachi can sometimes even check it. So, yeah, HP Grass, HP Fighting. Don't think I'm forgetting any on it because it has such great coverage. But yeah, Calm Mind doesn't necessarily need to run Grass, but it often does. And yeah, it doesn't really need to run anything else. Cool. Now we have Jolteon, which is just a classic electric situation. No more HP Water, because you don't really need that because Rhydon and Golem aren't like common OU Pokemon anymore. So you just run Grass if you're running a non-Ice Hidden Power, because Swampert is everywhere. Of course, HP Ice is great because it's still... I mean, it's not a great anti-Celebi option, but it's better than being totally walled. And the main reason is that you destroy not just Flygon, of course, which levitates above Spikes, and Jolteon loves Spikes, but you also threaten the hell out of Salamence. So I think most players generally prefer HP Grass Jolteon because when Swampert can't answer it, then it becomes a lot more threatening. I would generally agree with that. Like, HP Grass is definitely the standard on advanced Jolteon and Zapdos as well. But I think, mostly on Zapdos, but I think it's grown to be the standard on Jolteon nowadays as well. So, Magneton is an electric, but it's kind of an exception because it runs HP Fire quite a bit, because it needs to trap Fortress, and it's pretty much as simple as that. You can run HP Grass if you really want to hit Swampert, but it's rare that you'll be able to pull that off. I mean, there's some scenarios, some strategies, some teams that can make good use of it, but nothing huge. And HP Ice is all but died out. So I think Fire is the standard, because when you have a Magneton and it suddenly can't be used to defeat Fortress, it's just a bad feeling. And the upsides aren't big enough in my opinion, so it should always run Thunderbolt, HP Fire, and then whatever else your set calls for. You could run those two moves and be just fine, honestly. So, Metagross likes Hidden Power a lot. Its common ones are Fire and Grass. Fire for hitting Skarmory and, what's its face? Fortress on teams without Skarmory, or without Magneton, sorry. And HP Grass doesn't necessarily necessitate Magneton, but it definitely appreciates it, whether it's the classic Mash, EQ, Grass, Boom set, or if it's something like Psychic Pursuit, Grass, Boom. That's a great set on a Magneton team. I recommend that one. Asta has also used an awesome EQ or Mash, then T-Punch, HP Grass, Boom. So you T-Punch Skarm, and you still have HP Grass for Swampert. Because Psychicking through Swampert can be a frustrating ordeal sometimes, and this way you handle both of them. You have to have some anti-Fortress measures, of course, but that's not a problem. So, yeah, Metagross is a great user of Hidden Power. Hidden Power serves to kind of lift certain Pokemon into like viability, and also it just makes the best Pokemon even better. So, I mean, Metagross would be great without Hidden Power, so would T-Tar, but my god, with them. Milo doesn't use Hidden Power. I mean, even on its very rare offensive set, it's not even a guarantee. Moltres always uses HP Grass because half the point of being Moltres is that you are not stopped by Swampert. And none of its other hidden powers are worthwhile. Always, I mean, unless you're running a Morning Sun set, but in that case, you're not like using a wall breaking. If you're using Sunny Day, Morning Sun, Will-O-Wisp, Moltres, then you're not trying to wall break everything with Fire and HP Grass and Will-O-Wisp and Roar and Overheat and Spikes and Sand. The opposite, in fact, you don't want Sand. So, if you're running like a classic Moltres Spikes team, then HP Grass always. Porygon 2 has messed around with HP Fire and Fighting, both to ward off things like Metagross and Fortress, which is otherwise annoying. And with Fighting, it's deceptively annoying for T-Tar, which kind of struggles to break it sometimes. So, both good options. And it also kind of taps Lax down really nicely in Sand. So, and Porygon 2 has a lot of room for experimentation in its moveset, and it's surprisingly good with HP Fighting. I think that's like a cool option, a cool thing about Hidden Power. Like, yeah, I think the added coverage can be kind of silly sometimes, making things even harder to deal with than they already are, but like with some, it can also be well, I mean, you can use anything skillfully, even broken stuff, but I do sometimes like the applications of Hidden Power to keep things in check, like when HP Fighting P2 stops DD-Tar from setting up on it, things like that. So, or stop Snorlax from treating it as a free switch-in for a million free body slams. Starmie... Oh, wait, no, I skipped. Okay, Salamence, we know. HP Flying on physical sets, HP Grass on mixed sets. It's pretty simple, actually. When you HP Grass, you have Dragon Claw, Fire Blast, great coverage, and then with HP Grass, you make sure Swampert can't check you at all. So, that's pretty great. It's replaceable, for sure, though. It's not like HP Flying on physical sets. I mean... I also should have mentioned with Gyarados that HP Ghost exists because a lot of teams check Gyarados by surviving with Gengar and Starmie, and HP Ghost turns the tables on them pretty nicely. That is a cool option. And it can work on Mence, and the super effective hit on Claydol is cool too, but it's less explored, but it's not bad. So... HP Flying on physical sets, though, for the most part. And then HP Grass is a lot more replaceable because it's easier to deal with Swampert through Stab Dragon Claw, especially backed by Spikes, and the fact that Swampert's going to be tasked with checking a lot of other stuff, so if you can chunk it repeatedly, then that's nice. So, yeah, that's Pert for you, or that's Mence for you. Nothing else, really, because it also has great coverage. It even has Hydro Pump. So cool. HP Ground Skarmory is not a joke. It is a very serious set because Skarmory spikes on a lot, even with just no bulk investment, and with max attack and speed, then you have a chance. at handling a lot of Magnetons. So you get to have your... I mean, you don't have Skarmory like you normally would because you can't fit things like Protect and a lot of bulk, but it's still a very good Pokemon. Not an automatic addition to teams, but HP Ground Skarmory is definitely legit. And being able to like hit things like... because a lot of times Skarmory gets worn down by Metagross and T-Tar trying to just repeatedly slam it while it sets up spikes. And with HP Ground, you get to slam them in return instead of getting 3 spikes, but Metagross and T-Tar are still at full health, and you're struggling to OHKO them because they're so bulky and have such great typing. And when you run invested HP Ground, you also have invested Drill Peck, which is nice for things like Gengar switching in. Or Snorlax trying to beat you down as well. So, Snorlax doesn't use Hidden Power. Well, okay. Curse Rest sets have historically used things like HP Bug and HP Steel to try and, like, eat out these little, bits of coverage, like, eke out these little bits of coverage where they try to hit Gengar, or they try to hit T-Tar, but they're also not totally walled by Gengar, but they also want to hit Celebi, and HP Steel hits Arrow and T-Tar, and also, technically hits Gengar, so you're not 100% walled. Those sets really struggle, though. On the more offensive sets, which are much better than Snorlax, doesn't really use them. Starmie has used HP Grass because it is frustrating how Swampert counters everything sometimes, and sometimes it even checks Starmie late in the game. It can take those 2 Hydros from full health, but with HP Grass, you don't have that problem anymore. It's tough to fit, but the rewards are definitely well worth it because Swampert goes from surprisingly adept check to not a check at all. So, offensive Suicune likes HP Grass and, okay, HP Electric sometimes, rarely, but that's really if you're just trying to snipe someone who uses Gyarados a lot. It's generally not good. Generally, you prefer HP Grass, again, so that Swampert cannot handle you. Then, speaking of Swampert, it has used HP Grass on a few offensive sets, but it's generally not a good idea. Stick with the standard offensive set. And then a T-Tar. T-Tar loves Hidden Power. On physical sets like Band and 4 attacks and DD, then it has loved Bug for Claydol and Celebi. Neutral hit on Flygon is also nice. And even on DD, it sometimes uses HP Grass just so Swampert can't answer it, because T-Tar can do what it wants. And of course, like mixed and special sets love HP Grass as well, because again, not being answered by Swampert is fantastic. Now it's T-Tar, so I want to be thorough, and I'm pretty sure I'm not missing any. No, it doesn't use HP Flying. That is not a popular one. But yeah, it has such great coverage with all the fire, ice, thunder stuff. So yeah. All right, so I will be right back. One of my classic bathroom breaks. It's time. Drink a lot of water, and then we will continue with the remainder of Gen 3 and move on to Gen 4. Alright, so, luckily there's not too much left in Advanced BL, because Charizard is basically just Moltres. Charizard pretty much always uses HP Grass, even on, like, sub-Pitaya kind of stuff. I mean, sometimes if you're running Overheat or Blast Burn, if you're crazy, it's a lot of fun, but those aren't really seen in high-level play very often, unfortunately. But yeah, pretty much it's Moltres, basically, so run HP Grass. D-Knight, good HP Flying user on Band, great set. And then, a lot of this stuff is just gimmicky. Hariyama can run HP Bug on an offensive set. It's really, really nice. Cross Chop, HP Bug Knockoff, Focus Punch. Awesome set. Use it. Like, the things that technically wall it coverage-wise, like Salamence or whatever, you just knock them off, and they'll die long-term. Houndoom usually runs HP Grass. Jinx can run HP Fire to good effect, because otherwise Metagross and Fortress sit on it. But with HP Fire, then you are very difficult to wall. Lovely Kiss, Ice Beam, HP Fire, Taunt is a great set. Kingdra can run HP Grass to act like Starmie late game and not get walled by Swampert. Not have to Hydro Pump it, so you don't get like Toxic Stalled or something stupid. So then there's Ludicolo, which runs Stab HP Grass. Again, the generation of Stab HP Grass. Machamp, also HP Bug sometimes. Marowak runs HP Bug on 4 attack sets. Same idea. Celebi's a big deal in advance, and it both uses Hidden Power and is commonly targeted by Hidden Power. Metacham is cool because it doesn't need Hidden Power. It can run Shadow Ball and Rock Slide, so that's a nice little tidbit. Raikou, HP Grass versus HP Ice is the eternal debate. Most people settle on Grass because Flygon isn't that common, and you generally don't want to risk it. And Salamence doesn't love Thunderbolt, so that's generally the choice. And Raikou has also sometimes used Crunch to make up for the coverage difference against Celebi. Kind of like, did I skip over Zapdos? I skipped over Zapdos. Yeah, Zapdos, it's electric, grass, ice. Sometimes it runs grass and Drill Pecks to handle Celebi instead of Exeggutor like in GSC. So, Zapdos has also run HP, it's run HP Ice commonly as well, of course, but it's also run HP Fighting sometimes now, because it really, really smacks T-Tar hard. Mix Zapdos with invested Drill Peck and HP Fighting, alongside a Stab Thunderbolt that's strong even when uninvested, and you can still give it some good investment. It's really tough to deal with, because Swampert doesn't want to switch into Stab Drill Peck with spikes down, and you should be using it with spikes. You smack T-Tar, Blissey cannot answer you. That's kind of the harsh side of Hidden Power. How, I can answer this Zapdos with my Blissey, right? Oh, whoops, at HP Fighting. Oh, that's not good. So Zapdos is unique in that regard. Just one of the many, many reasons why Zapdos is so amazing. Choice Band is a little too far. It's gimmicky. You need the leftovers, longevity, and the ability to switch moves, but HP Fighting Zapdos is great. And even if you think you want to cheese turn 1 KOs against T-Tar with HP Fighting Zapdos, just remember that even Choice Band HP Fighting is, I think it's roughly a 44% chance to KO max HP T-Tar on turn 1. So, no. Unless you're really certain the T-Tar won't have max HP. Ugh, silly. Don't do that. So Raikou, generally HP Grass. Regice can run HP Fire for Metagross and Fori, much like on Jinx, although it really wants to run Thunder Wave, so it's kind of a dilemma. Regirock has run HP Rock before, because people were like, oh no, I want my higher accuracy, but I liked every bit of special defense I can get on Regirock and attack and everything. So I like the extra power of Rock Slide. So, and it means Scarm can't you can flinch Scarm trying to Whirlwind you, which is nice. Then Registeel has run similar offensive kinds of sets. Rhydon doesn't need to run HP Bug because it has Mega Horn, which is really cool. So no walling this with Claydol at all. Scizor, HP Bug on Baton Pass stuff. And some people like HP Fighting reversal stuff and various hidden powers, but it's a rare choice most of the time. HP Bug Swarm is really cool. It doesn't have Technician in Gen 3, because Technician does not exist in Gen 3. At least unless, I'm pretty sure it doesn't. Suddenly I'm just convincing myself that it... Okay, yeah, Leaf Guard also doesn't exist, and neither does Sniper, so yeah, this is just an updated team builder. So that's... What's it called? Technician... No, not Technician. See, that's Scizor. See, Technician... Validate. Technician does not exist in Gen 3. There you go. I had to make sure. Anyway, so yeah, HP Bug or HP Fighting on Scizor, but it's generally... consult HCLAT for Scizor expertise. And yeah, other than that, we don't really have much. Steelix has used HP Rock before. I like Rock Slide still. Venusaur has used HP Grass before. Weezing has used HP Grass and HP Fighting. You kind of see the trends on the hidden powers here. Things that need to hit Swampert, Grass. Things that need to hit T-Tar, Fighting. Things that need to hit Celebi, Bug. Things like that. Generally good coverage moves. Oh, and HP Fire, of course, for the many steals. So, those are the trends. Fighting for T-Tar and Bliss. Yeah, so those are your hidden powers. And, and even HP Ghost sometimes. How quaint. Anyway, we're moving on to Gen 4. And this is the improved coverage options of Generation 4 mean that Scizor doesn't use it. Well, the physical special split means Scizor won't be using HP Bug anymore. And the fact it also gets Bug Buzz now. But it, yeah, there's also the fact that there are more coverage options, more close combats and things of that nature being doled out. So you don't have with the physical special split, then things like Machamp can use Ice Punch, so they don't have to use HP. They can use Ice Punch so they don't have to use something else. That was not a well thought out example, but you get the idea. Pokemon. Oh, opposite example. Gengar can't use Fire Punch now. It has to use HP Fire, so downgrade in that sense. It's kind of funny, like how Calm Mind Jirachi, the traditional Super Jirachi set from Advance, is Psychic, Grass, not HP. Or no, sorry, Calm Mind Psychic, HP Grass, Fire Punch, and then and that let it run max speed. And in Gen 4 for a long time, the standard was Calm Mind Psychic, Grass, not HP Fire, which made it cut down its speed IV. So it kind of flipped in that which coverage had to be special. But it gets by anyway. So not a lot of and with the improved cover, like U-turns and things, and of course hidden powers are stronger now. I mean, Gengar for a long time ran Life Orb, HP Fire, which hard to switch into for something like a Jirachi. So there's that, and so Power Boost, residual damage with Stealth Rock on every team makes it even harder to deal with. So, but not as many users of it. HPI's Bronzong kind of carried over from Gen 5, but we'll get to Gen 5. And it's just really just for Gliscor and also things like Dragonite, so it can handle them without exploding. Celebi, HP Fire, although Celebi's usage died really after Gen 4 stopped being the main gen a couple of years later. It's not like completely extinct or anything, but it's not common. But during the main gen, it commonly ran HP Fire on its Bold, Leech Seed, T-Wave kind of sets. And I remember it was very popular to wait until Scizor took 2 Stealth Rock rounds before you would HP Fire it, because it would not automatically KO. Yeah, you don't get a lot of hidden powers on most of these top... I mean, by ABC order anyway, not regularly. I mean, Empoleon ran HP Electric very, very rarely because it has Grass Knot, which is such fantastic coverage. And but yeah, HP Electric was very rare. It was really just for Gyarados and other Empoleon. Yeah, so then Flygon doesn't need to run anymore. Fori doesn't need to run anymore. Gengar ran HP Fire once upon a time. I mean, sometimes Scarf sets would run something like HP Ice, but that was also rare. Gliscor, no. Gara, no. Now finally, Heatran. Heatran can run a lot of hidden powers depending on the set. Grass is the most common on like offensive Stealth Rock sets, or just all-out offensive sets with Magma Storm, or any other Fire Stab, or on specs. So those commonly run Grass because destroying Swampert is nice. Hitting things like Starmie and Suicune are excellent as well. It also has the capability to run HP Ice on Scarf sets, which lets it actually beat things like Dragonite, Non-Scarf Flygon one-on-one. Gliscor is another big one. Instead of doing 80, you do well over 100. So that's big, but only really seen on Scarf. And so in the past, it also used HP Electric a couple times back when Gyarados was really popular, because it also hit... When Gyarados was really popular and Starmie was kind of declining, post-Dragon Ban, when the grasses like Shaman and Breloom started popping up everywhere, and Gyarados was really popular because Rest Hog Gyarados on stall and just DD in general were threatening. So yeah, HP Electric was popular then because it hit the more popular Gyara while also hitting Starmie and Suicune, and you didn't really need to worry about Swampert that much. But then it kind of switched around, so... yeah, those are the hidden powers of Heatran. Don't think I'm missing any. But yeah, Grass is the most popular by far. Ice on Scarf, but Scarf is a lot less popular now. It just has such great coverage moves naturally that it doesn't really need to. Oh, and Gen 4, the physical special split also means that all hidden powers, regardless of type, are now special. Should have mentioned that as well. So, yeah, that's that. Infernape has such great coverage it doesn't really need to use hidden power most of the time, but it's classic Mix-Ape set. Fire Blast, Close Combat, Grass Knot. Grass Knot is really huge because it means it doesn't have to run HP Grass, and that's what made its coverage so great. And it commonly ran HP Ice, so things like Salamence, when that was in the tier, couldn't handle it. And, being able to OHKO Gliscor, again, really nice. Things like Dragonite as well. Of course, that moveset was always fairly pliable. And when Gyarados was popular, HP Electric popped up, on Mix-Ape, on, like Nasty Plot Ape sometimes. But it's generally rarer because, again, hidden power, I mean, the existence of hidden power is still definitely crazy. But it definitely kind of got balanced out by the fact that all these new Pokemon have such great coverage options that they don't really need it as much. It's kind of like a bonus afterthought kind of thing. I don't think because again, look at all this coverage. It's like, what hidden power could you possibly need to put on it besides Ice or, not even Electric anymore. So, yeah. And another thing to remember with Hidden Power is that it is not necessarily stronger than a neutral stab move. I mean, the golden example of this is that, like, a neutral Fire Blast. Let's say it's Infernape against Nidoqueen, and you have a choice between Fire Blast or HP Ice. And you would think, oh, well, HP Ice is super effective. And then you realize HP Ice is 70 base power, times 2, 140 damage is being dealt to Nidoqueen. Then you think of how strong Fire Blast is. 120 times 1.5 for stab. So half of 120 is 60. Add 60 to 120, you get 180. So you have the choice of either a 180 base power attack or a 140 base power attack. Sizable difference. But there's even the classic example that a lot of people kind of mess up is when, in Gen 3, when you have the choice between a 2 times effective Hidden Power and a Stab Thunderbolt, for example, then they'll go with the super effective Stab Hidden Power. I mean, this one's not as noticeable a difference, but let's take the classic example of Metagross versus Magneton versus Metagross, and you can either Thunderbolt it or HP Fire it. And HP Fire, 70 times 2, 140. And then Thunderbolt is 95 times 1.5, so you get up to 142.5. Round it down to 142. That's still 2 base power more, but you HP fired it and it survived with 2 HP and it lived and destroyed you. So that's a big one, especially in these early generations. So yeah, Infernape. Jirachi doesn't really run. It has such great coverage. It doesn't really need. I mean, HP Fire is great on if you want the special fire move, but it can also run Fire Punch. You can attack from both sides of the spectrum. It's most commonly run HP Fire and Ice just because sometimes, I mean, it can also Icy Wind, and it has, like, I've run an Icy Wind HP Fire set quite a lot. It's great. But sometimes you want the extra power, so, like, if you're running an all-out attacking set that doesn't have fire coverage, or if you're fine using Fire Punch, you can just HP Ice and get the extra power and ensure you're taking down that Gliscor or whatever. So, but that's really it. Like, with Grass Knot, you don't need HP Grass anymore. And, you know, what other... I forgot the most obvious one. Thank God I scrolled. HP Ground, because... and this is kind of an example of how crazy... a good Pokemon can be made even more crazy by just this one little coverage thing. Because you think, oh, well, my Heatran destroys everything Jirachi can do, and then it, you know, Calm Minds and HP Grounds, and goodbye Heatran. And HP Ground is still good coverage because it hits T-Tar super effectively. It slams Magna Zone. Other Jirachi, Metagross. So yeah, HP Ground Jirachi, really, I remember post-Salamence ban, then the new Super Rachi set, Calm Mind, Psychic T-Bolt, HP Ground, became really popular because Heatran was everywhere. So, yeah, that's a huge example. So, like, Fire and Ice are popular hidden powers on Jirachi, but the biggest one, the most defining one is definitely Ground. It doesn't even need to be used on Calm Mind sets. You can go, like, mixed, like Iron Head, Fire Punch, you know, Body Slam, or HP Ground, Body Slam, Thunder, HP Ground, that kind of stuff. Throw Sub and Protect in there, or Protect, usually. It's just a terrifying Pokemon. Kingdra doesn't really use HP much at all. I mean, HP Electric for Gyarados and Empoleon, I guess, but not really great. I've used a fun set like that before, but nothing really to report. Latias used to run HP Fire the first time it was in the tier quite a lot because Scizor was everywhere. Nowadays, not so much. You know, less Fories, less Scizors. You're not doing much to Jirachi anyway. So generally better to focus on its other moves. It doesn't really have any other worthwhile hidden powers. Lucario generally runs physical sets, so, I mean, Specs or Calm Mind stuff can run HP Ice, but those are generally not so great, in my opinion. Machamp doesn't need it. Magnazone. Fun story about Magnazone. Used to originally only run HP Grass to bait in. The idea was you T-Bolt Scarm, then Swampert comes in and you HP Grass it after, so kind of similar to Advance, but that was kind of hard to pull off when people would just go to a Salamence or something instead. So HP Fire, because it lets you, I mean, you're trapping Scizor most of the time anyway, but it also lets you beat Fortress, and that's really big, so it doesn't set up like multiple layers of spikes and T-spikes in your face. And the other options aren't really as great. But in more recent times, as a Scarf Magnazone has become popular, and Dugtrio was banned, so that made Magnazone better, but Heatran also became better, obviously, and so people started running HP Ground on their Scarf Magnazones, because, you know, it's still, I mean, you don't really need HP Fire when this metagame with Scizor and Fori at an all-time low, and having stayed that way for, you know, half a decade at this point, more, and HP Ground gives you the, I mean, it also lets you trap other Magnazones quite nicely. if they're locked. Well, if they're locked in a T-Ball, it doesn't really matter. But it lets you trap bulky Magnazones, not Scarf Magnazones, really, really efficiently. And it lets you, I mean, I'm not saying throw a Magnazone into Heatran, but like if you can, Heatran grabs a KO, then you can prevent it from getting another. So instead of Heatran, you know, fire blasting one thing and booming on another, then you just limit it to one with HP ground. Really good. So yeah, that's zoned for you. Metagross, I mean, it's messed around with like HP fire fun stuff before. It doesn't really use it anymore. It's like with Trick in its arsenal and things like Grass Knot, if it really, really needs to, but even then, it just sticks to physical stuff. Roserade. It used to be between fire and ice, but it's really just fire on like lead sets and bulky sets alike. Lead sets started running HP ground actually for quite some time because again, Heatran everywhere, and even if it was Shuka Train, just breaking that Shuka and doing a lot of damage anyway was huge for your Calm Mind Jirachi later. You know, if it did or didn't have HP ground of its own. And yeah, so Roserade, fire, ground. Pretty simple. I mean, it's always going to have gaps in its coverage no matter what you do with it, but it's having that hidden power. I mean, grass type's coverage would be, I mean, it's, you look at Venusaur and UU and it like pretty much never runs hidden power. I mean, sometimes like HP Rock or something, but almost never, because it's grass stab. Grass and poison is such a great stab combination in that tier because the only common steel is Registeel, and yeah, that's annoying but manageable, whereas in OU you have steals around every corner, so you, I mean, if you want to be an offensive threat, you can't get by on grass poison coverage. You can do it on a defensive set sometimes, and sometimes even an offensive set, because Roserade is usually used in more of a utility role, even on its faster sets, but the fact that it's not such a huge offensive threat with such a good typing, good speed tier, such a massively powerful stab attack, it's just because of it relying on hidden power for coverage, and even then, like, coming up short a lot of the time. So, lots of dragons and steals, not just steals. Yeah, Rotom. Rotom doesn't run HP a lot, but HP Ice has become quite popular on Scarf, so it can revenge kill DD Knight, and just generally have a good move for healthy Flygon, and hitting grasses super effectively is quite nice as well, a little boost there. And it's also seen some use on some cool subsets as well. I used to run sub T-Ball HP Ice Split is cool because it's basically like Zapdos, but with Pain Split instead of Roost. But I also really liked T-Ball Wisp HP Ice Pain Split as well. That was really cool. And yeah, so that's pretty much it for Rotom's. Because most of the time when you want a coverage move on Rotom, you just change the form. You don't need to run Hidden Power. Scizor, okay, when Gen 4 was the main generation, I swear, there was a guy who ran HP Electric Scizor, because I think he lowered its base power to give it the Technician boost too, and he would destroy Gyarados with it. It was multiple times. It was hilarious. Yeah, so Scizor there. Starmie doesn't really use Hidden Power, because again, it has Grass Knot. Back when there was a period where Abomasnow was really popular, so I used this really goofy Starmie with HP Fire to hit Abomasnow. It was awesome. And it would also destroy Scizor, who was more popular at that time as well. So, that was cool. Suicune doesn't really use Hidden Power either. One time, Eternal counter-teamed Haldar, I believe his name was. It's a French player, he was great. And Haldar was known for using Abomasnow, so Eternal put HP Fire on his Suicune. And, yeah, that was just a pure counter-team. Very, very, very silly. At least Starmie can pretend to HP Fire Fori, so it doesn't have to, fear payback as much from Split F sets. So, Suicune doesn't HP a lot, Swampert doesn't. I've run HP Grass T-Tar quite a bit in DPP, and some others have done that as well, but it's rare. It's not the, expected set it is in Generation 3, because it's harder to fit, and T-Tar has physical Dark Stab now, so it can run stab on both sides of the spectrum, or it can run both stabs on the physical side of the spectrum. So, you don't need to HP Grass Swampert when you can CB Crunch, for example. So, yeah, that Hidden Powers, but only rarely. And Zapdos Hidden Powers, I mean, it should pretty much always be Ice, just because that coverage is really, really crucial. And Ice, I mean, Grass is also good, but I always just found Zapdos being walled by Gliscor to be so silly. I mean, because you can't, because once you start using things like Toxic Grass, then you just struggle against things like Nidoqueen, and Ice is just so good. Swampert can be dealt with. I mean, I'd rather run Ice Toxic than something else, than vice versa. And Zapdos also gets even tougher to deal with because of things like Heat Wave. So whereas otherwise Abomasnow would be like a great counter, it doesn't even want to answer Zapdos. So you can tweak Heat Wave, the existence of Heat Wave and Toxic to help decide your Zapdos hidden power, which is cool. Oh, and I also like Zapdos using HP Flying. Usually on specs, not necessarily. It can be used on some sub-roost sets as well. But generally on specs, then it was used when Machamp was really popular because it was one of the few moves in the lead slot that could actually OHKO it. And it's actually surprisingly strong when backed by... I mean, it's like a banned Mence HP Flying in advance. And a lot of people scramble to figure out what type it is. And it's deceptively good coverage coming from Zapdos. It's like it smacks Swampert really, really hard. So... oh, while I'm on the subject of HP Flying, I forgot to mention in Gen 3 that Arrow sometimes likes HP Flying just for neutral coverage. Just for example, you can double-edge Swampert with Arrow, but you're not going to cover a Gengar answer switch, and with HP Flying you hit both. So I just wanted to mention that because it was really important, and I forgot it until now. But yeah, HP Flying spec Zapdos in Gen 4 was a thing of beauty, and not so seen nowadays, but, you know, HP Flying in neutral target and seeing how much it would do was just a great, great sight. You don't want to spam HP Flying and, you know, give T-Tar a free switch necessarily, of course. You had to be smart, but it also had a big Specs T-Bolt backing it up. So, and when in doubt, it could U-turn. So, yeah, Shaman, basically a Celebi situation. Not much else. Not many other hidden powers here. I mean, you can talk about like some goofy HP Fire Crest stuff, but not really a lot. Raikou, same situation as before, except in Heart Gold and Soul Silver, it got Aura Sphere, and so it could kind of adapt its coverage a little bit, especially with things like Extrasensory. You could do goofy stuff. Like Aura Sphere, Extrasensory, HP Grass is a really fun set. You know, you think Brilliant thinks it can take a hit because you don't have HP Ice, and then you Extrasensory it, and you have Aura for T-Tar, and it's just awesome. So, yeah, but it still commonly runs Ice on, like, faster Calm Mind sets. So, and then UU, like, Clef doesn't really run any hidden powers, and nothing else really to report, I don't think so. Gen 4 went by pretty quickly, in fact. So that's cool. Even Nidoqueen doesn't run hidden powers because it has such great coverage. So, alright, Gen 5. Now, Gen 5, I'm just going to get the obvious one out of the way. Landorus Therian runs HP Ice for Gliscor and other Landorus Therian and Dragons. HP Ice is everywhere this gen because Dragons and the Gliscor and Landorus Therian, to answer them, are everywhere. Like Heatran, for its offensive set, like with Balloon, then that one almost always ran HP Ice, so it could like lead off against Garchomp with its Balloon unbroken and you know, beat it one-on-one. And it was a good answer to like DD Knight, and you know. So yeah, HP Ice Heatran became popular. And then of course, I mean, we've even seen HP Ice Garchomp in more recent times because even things like Life Orb Draco Meteor get shrugged off by Spadef Gliscor, and with HP Ice, then you don't have that drop and you just hit it even harder. So yeah, HP Ice Garchomp. HP Ice Fortress was quite popular in Black and White 1 to deal with Subtoxic Gliscor and Landorus Incarnate, who ran physical sets at the time because it didn't have Sheer Force yet. It had, what's it called? Sand Force. So HP Ice Fortress was quite common. And with Volt Switch, it ran the Bolt Beam combination. Yeah, but not a lot of... Zam. Okay, Zam also runs HP Ice. Also, I mean, it can run HP Fire, of course. Good coverage, but I think most people prefer HP Ice because suddenly things that would normally take a hit, you know, even with Rock Salt like D-Knight, Tornadus, and of course the ever-annoying Gliscor, you know, with HP Ice, they're just not a problem anymore. So, yeah, HP Ice is really, really big on Zam. It's one of the reasons why it's so tough to deal with. Then, you know, we kind of skipped through a lot of Pokemon down to 4. We mentioned HP Ice doesn't really run anymore. Even HP Ice Garchomp is actually, like, not something to expect, but not something to be surprised by anymore. Then Heatran, in addition to the aforementioned HP Ice Balloon stuff, there was also a period where it was running a lot of Grass Gem HP Grass, which ruins Politoed, you know, crushes Rotom Wash, Jellicent, and of course, just having HP Grass in general means you're not getting walled by Gastrodon. So yeah, those two hidden powers were Heatran's forte, but generally on offensive sets you expect HP Ice more, because I can't stress enough how big HP Ice is in Generation 5. Jirachi ran, I mean, doesn't so much anymore, but when Jirachi was running sets other than Spadef, like it does all the time now, then it ran a lot of HP Ice. Keldeo has run HP Ice before quite a lot, and it has Icy Wind. I mean, on Scarf, you don't really care about the speed drop, and you want to just immediately KO that D-Knight, but it has also run HP Ice on, like, Expert Belt sets that are, like, if they go double Water, for example, or Toxic, then, and you don't really need that second coverage move. Then if you're just gonna go with one ice coverage move, then you prefer HP Ice. Lando, we've already gone over. You know, every set Scarf, defensive. Swords Dance uses HP Ice. How crazy is that? Yeah, so I'm just gonna go through all the HP Ice users first. Oh, Reuniclus uses HP Ice because, yeah, I don't want Gliscor answering me. I want to be immediately threatening to Garchomp and Dragonite. Yep, HP Ice Reuniclus. Rotom Wash has used HP Ice before for similar reasons, because Hydro is bad PP and often played around. And HP Ice just lets you be no nonsense. So, anything else? HP Ice. Oh, Terrakia. Yeah, I mean, okay, it's not a good HP Ice user, but it has been used with HP Ice before. And it's not reliable because it's so weak. But even with Life Orb, surprisingly strong, and it's not like Lando and Gliscor switching unscathed to begin with, so it can be the missing difference. And Thunderous Therian uses HP Ice, of course, but that's more of an electric thing as opposed to a black and white thing, although it certainly helps that Thunderous is so fast and has such a high killer special attack stat, so it just destroys all those HP Ice weak Pokemon. Then, of course, there's Volk, which has run HP Ice before. Not so common, not so much anymore, but it has run HP Ice for D-Knight, Garchomp, otherwise good checks. And things like Thunderous Therian and Tornadus and Rain, which its Fire Blast would come up short against. And then there's not really a lot of lower tier Pokemon you got to take into account, so that's nice at least. So, yeah, I mean, I guess HP... No, Tornadus has run HP Grass before for Rotom Wash. So actually a pretty good set. Oh, it's another one of those yoga ads. Yes, keep playing. Yeah, so HP Grass Tornadus has existed, but I think that's really the only thing that needs to be covered. I mean, Zapdos, the rare occasion it gets used, it uses Ice. Nothing else really to report. Celebi and Shaman, on the fusion occasions they've been used, they run HP Fire most of the time. And I guess on some occasions then you see things like HP Ice alongside, like in that Tisung versus Megan game, then he had Shaman and Magnazone, so he didn't need HP Fire, he could just run Ice. But that's a very, very rare exception. Oh, Amoonguss used to run HP Fire and Ice quite a bit. Of course, Ice for Gliscor trying to Sleep Absorb, but Fire just for Ferrothorn. Ice also helps it check things like Thunderous Therian better. But Amoonguss kind of disappeared because Sleep Ban. So, but yeah, pre-Sleep Ban, Amoonguss used HP quite a bit. I didn't need to, though. Could run like Sludge Bomb and Sleep Talk. Yeah, Amoonguss was amazing. I don't know why I just clicked on Hitmonlee. That was a little bit of a misclick. But yeah, I don't think anything else really worth mentioning down here. We can go through the remainder of the OUs. Yeah. Unless I'm missing something totally obvious, but I don't think I am. So, we'll go back to Volcarona. Volk has also, of course, used Hidden Power Ground because, yeah, you know, Heatran would wall it forever, but it would be a little too easy that way, so give it HP Ground. Yeah, another reason to use Balloon on Tran, so yeah, at least get one turn to Toxic it or Magma Storm or whatever. So, roar it out maybe. So, yeah, that's Volcarona. I mean, it doesn't need to run a Hidden Power Ground, but it just makes itself even more absurd that way. So, oh yeah, speaking of pre-bans, Venusaur ran HP Fire on Sun teams before Chlorophyll was destroyed. So yeah, Volcarona, ridiculous. Luckily, not too many other uses. Oh, Rotom Wash used to run HP... Oh, this is funny. Both HP Grass when Gastrodon was at its peak in Black and White 1, and HP Fire to hit Ferrothorn numerous times. Although that's... I mean, it was common Black and White 1, then it kind of died out, and then it showed up again on rare occasions. Pretty good. Then, of course, speaking of HP Fire Electric, then you have Magnazone, whose life purpose is to remove Ferrothorn. And, yeah, needs to run Sunny Day or Specs to make sure Rain Ferrothorn doesn't spike on it a gajillion times. Yeah, Lottie's also ran HP Fire before, but nowadays not so much, because it's better on Latios, but because it's more of an offensive threat. But you generally don't need to fit it on a lot of teams. It can be good, for sure. Keeping Ferrothorn out of your face and forcing in T-Tar and weakening it for your late game Zam or whatever is crazy good. But definitely not a necessity. Just serves to make it even better than it already is. Oh, and Keldeo also has run HP Grass before. Let's see. Oh, there have been some sightings of HP flying on spec sets back when Amoonguss was popular because it destroyed Amoonguss, it destroyed Poison Heal Breloom, and it destroyed Toxicroak. That was funny. HP Ghost is always an obvious good shout for the Slow Twins and Jellicent and Lottie switches. And back in the day, when Specially Defensive Celebi was desperately trying to hold OU together against all the Landos and Brelooms, then it was doing a pretty good job. I mean, then Lando started using U-Turn, but Keldeo also started using HP Bug, which was really, really stupid. And yeah, so Keldeo is a great example. Low move pool, but it's already great, and with Hidden Power, it becomes even more ridiculous. So that's Gen 5's Hidden Power. And now we move on to Gen 6, still looking at Hitmonlee. So Moongus still has that HP Fire. It really doesn't use HP Ice almost ever because it's more concerned with trying to HP Fire Ferrothorn that would otherwise block its Spore. And Gliscor is more manageable with things like Worry Seed, which is awesome. Generally, you don't see, not seeing a ton of hidden powers here. I mean, I know when Gen 6 was the main gen and Quag stalls were everywhere, then CBB used some HP Grass Charizard X fun, because it did have a base 130 special attack, so it hit Quag really hard. And Zard Y is not really an HP user. Diancie, of course, uses his hidden power to balance out its already great coverage. I mean, you don't need it necessarily if you're running Moonblast, Diamond Storm, Protect, and Earth Power, but you generally make it a lot more threatening with HP Fire, which is, of course, the standard for Ferrothorn, and, hitting Skarmory and Mega Metagross as well, of course, and Mega Scizor. But if you can handle those, then a surprisingly good option is HP Ice, because Moonblast will often come up short against things like Bulky Lanos and Gliscor, mainly Gliscor. So you think HP Ice is redundant with Fairy coverage, but it really isn't. And Gen 6 is, of course, the generation where Hidden Power was nerfed to 60 base power. And, I should also mention for Gen 5 that some people used gems on Hidden Power. So, I mean, say what you will about Z moves, but at least they couldn't be used for Hidden Power. Gems, they could, so nothing like Fire Gem boosted HP Fire on Rotom Wash to kill Ferrothorn, dumb junk like that. Oh yeah, that was crazy. And now you don't have those anymore because gems are kaput and Hidden Power is weaker. And weak Hidden Power ices is why Spadef Gliscor is unkillable in this gen. Anyway, not really a lot of other Hidden Powers here, which is nice. I mean, even Gengar stopped running the occasional HP Ice and more went in favor of... I should have mentioned HP Fire Gengar in Gen 4. During the main gen, it ran when CB Scizor was everywhere, and there was always the problem of is it going to Bullet Punch or is it going to Pursuit? Then Gengar started running Protect and HP Fire, and if Scizor Bullet Punched, it would switch to Magnazone, and if Scizor Pursued, then it would stay in an HP Fire. So, that was cool, and that set was not really used much after the Dragons left, but yeah, so Gengar now prefers Icy Wind because it destroys Scarftar Switchins and Assault Vest Tornadus Therian. And Heatran didn't really run Hidden Power for a long time, but eventually with like Gliscor and like Tank Garchomp becoming really popular, then HP Grass became really popular on it. Ice, not Grass. Obviously. So offensive sets with HP Ice on Heatran are really threatening. Like Magma, EP, Ice are stupid hard for a lot of teams to wall, especially if you accentuate it with something like Toxic for Gastrodon, or you just deal with that with teammates like HP Grass, Keldeo. Yeah, Keldeo's go-to Hidden Power now is HP Grass because Gastrodon, Oko, and hitting Jellicent and the Slow Twins, Slowbro mostly, but being able to HP Grass Mega Slowbro is really big because that Pokemon can get out of hand if you're not careful. So yeah, we already covered Keldeo there. There were also like very occasional HP Rock Heatrans on like Scarf and just to deal with Talonflame and set up Volks and Zard Y. But those were, always competed with Stone Edge. So, what other hidden powers? Oh, Jirachi doesn't really hidden power this gen. Kyurem Black sometimes would HP Fire for, and I guess it rarely did this in Gen 5 too, but mostly in this gen. HP Fire, not just for Ferrothorn, but also for Mega Scizor, which is otherwise a great answer to its Stabs and Fusion Bolt and Earth Power. So, that was that. Lando T, of course, HP Ices as much as ever. It's less about the dragons as much as itself and Gliscor. But still, it's just such great coverage. Ground Ice is such good coverage, and when you when you go from having that, just ground, and then you have, ice on top of that. I mean, Gliscor has its own version in Ice Fang, but, and see, that's the coverage thing again. But with Lando, because it has such a great special attack stat too, so it really hits hard. A lot of these, they HP fired for a while, then they realized it was mostly pointless and not good, and a waste of not as good as other moves they could be running, so there's that. Zone still HP fires for Ferrothorn, very, very necessary. Yeah, once Ferrothorn came out, then any non-HP fire Magnazone was pretty much junk. Manaphy speaking of HP firing Ferrothorns, Manaphy has used it quite a bit. It's tougher to fit into your coverage, but Water Fire and then something like Shadow Ball actually covers quite a lot of stuff. So yeah, you definitely have had HP fire Manaphys in the past. Although over time it was realized, look, Ferrothorn is not immortal. It can be hit by a lot of stuff, and +3 Ice Beam still does a ton of damage. Although a lot of people did really hate HP Fire Manaphy because it's so hard to deal with for so much balance. Megamanectric. It has the benefit of being an HP Ice Electric type that also has fire coverage. So it's like Zapdos in that sense, which is really, really cool. So other than that, it's Megamanectric. It's simple. Metagross has run HP Fire in Oris. I mean, rarely. It was more common at the beginning of Sun and Moon when people were desperate to counter a super broken Mega Meta with Mega Scizor and Tangrowth, and of course trying to chip it with Ferrothorn sometimes. So same as Oris, basically, and you could theoretically just HP Fire those guys and Metagross would be even stupider to counter, but it generally was never took off, really. The speed drop is pretty big for other metas, Diancie, Lottie Twins, and it's generally not great enough a coverage move. Because it's 60 base power, unstab, and it doesn't have enough super effective targets. I mean, it also hits Helmet Skarmory, and so that's nice, but when you face a Spadef Skarm, then it doesn't do anything, so. Rotom Wash doesn't really hit in power anymore. I mean, it's been seen on rare occasions, but those were really counter teams more than anything else. Fun fact, there was a period where Mega Scizor was running HP Fire to counter itself in late Oris. That was really funny. And it would also, like, dink Ferrothorn a little. But yeah, it was mostly, anti-Scizor. Oh, Lando also ran HP Fire for the same purpose because Mega Scizor was really good for a while there. So ABR was running HP Fire Lando and HP Fire Mega Scizor. And they were surprisingly good. They hit quite hard. Yeah, Superior. Oh, yeah. Talk about a grass type that. Okay, well, Superior is crazy because it has a move for like Knockoff and Leech Seed and Glare and Taunt and all that stuff, so it doesn't really need hidden power. But you would think, oh, Ferrothorn, and then that goes out the window because it's just HP Fires. Nothing else is really worth it. I mean, I know some people have tried to lure Heatran with HP Ground. You lure Talonflame and Zard Y and Volcarona with HP Rock and Volcanion, I guess. But no, I take that one back. I forget that it's neutral to grass. And like HP Ice, but no, Leaf Storm and HP Fire is just generally the most tried and true because it's generally better to be able to threaten things like Pharaoh and Mega Metagross and Skarmory instantly, and the rest they can crumble to like Glare and Knock Off and Paralysis and Taunt and stuff. So also good to be able to hit Amoonguss, that's a really big one. So yeah, Skarm, Slowbro, Starmie, not a lot of hidden powers here. HP Fire Starmie's been used on some Hyper Offense stuff when you really want to keep Ferrothorn out of your face, but generally no. Tangrowth, Fire, Ice, it's like Amoonguss, keeps that. Where is Amoonguss? Is that an RU again? Or did I just skip over it in OU? Oh, no, I skipped over it in OU. But yeah, Amoonguss. Actually, I talked about it already. Oh, my memory's failing. But yeah, so we are back down to Tangrowth. Yeah, Fire, Ice, Defensive Grass. Necessary, handle Gliscor or Ferrothorn, Mega Metagross. Generally, if you have a decent special attack stat and you've got super effective coverage, you need super effective coverage against the things you're supposed to be handling or things you're going to be facing a lot. Like, you're not going to be using Tangrowth to handle Ferrothorn, but you want to prevent Ferrothorn from sitting on your face. So, do that, pair it with something like Knockoff, so you cover everything. If Heatran wants to wall your coverage, it'll lose its leftovers. It's more effective than letting Ferrothorn spike on your face forever, just as an example. So yeah, Tangrowth runs that. Thundurus, HP Ice, of course. Torntherian actually runs HP Ice quite a bit as well, because Spadef Gliscor is like the best Pokemon ever to counter everything that doesn't have super effective moves on it, and HP Ice, it needs special attack investment or you just won't 2 KO it through Poison Heal, it's crazy. But yeah, HP Ice Tornadus Therian is quite good. And just the coverage in general, like when you're facing a hyper offense team and you want to HP Ice a Thundurus, for example. And yeah, generally useful. So then Venusaur is underrated, but runs HP Fire a lot because, again, Grass type running HP Fire. What else is new? And then there's Zapdos running HP Ice as always. So that's Auras for you. You don't really see a lot of HP on Latios or Latios. Raikou is kind of gone. And you don't really see Hidden Power on... Oh, you see HP Grass Volcanion. That's a great set. Yeah, I would generally... That's my favorite. Steam Eruption, Flamethrower, HP Grass. And then I like Sludge Bomb a lot, because hitting Clef is really good. But you can also do things like Sub or Protect. And Zam, both regular Zam, but Mega Zam is the more popular one. Again, HP Ice. I can't stress enough how big beating Gliscor is in this generation. So you go from being checked by it to just ripping through it. Generally good to have. So yeah, you run that a lot. And anything else notable? Thundurus Therian also runs HP Ice. Victini doesn't run it. Oh, Volk, of course, the whole HP Ground thing. It doesn't run the other hidden powers as much. You're not going to be seeing HP Ice, Volk, and Auras. But Ground, if it is running a hidden power. For Heatran, it's crazy. So then, anything else I'm missing? I don't quite think so. Not at this point, anyway. Hydreigon is great, but doesn't really need hidden power. And Nidoking, also big threat, doesn't need hidden power. Yeah, Buff Knockoff is also pretty big in this generation, and like the fact that it's an offensive tool means every generation kind of has its own hidden power-esque offensive boost, and like in terms of making Pokemon even tougher to deal with. Like, it's not enough that, like, let's say Crawdon has stab adaptability crunches. It can also remove your item now. So, yeah, okay, I don't think there's anything left worth mentioning in OU. So we're going to move on to Gen 7. So, Mega Zam generally ices, but also can fire, and... it has a lot more. What's the Calm Mind? Generally, I think Psychic, Shadow Ball, Focus Blast, Recover is the most reliable overall set, just because it lets you go the distance against things like Heatran and Toxapex when you Trace Regenerator. So, especially if you get burned as opposed to Toxic, or single layer poisoned if it's T-Spikes and not T-Spikes Toxic. So. That one, admittedly, I'm a bit out of touch with Gen 7, but I wanted to cover all the hidden power generations, so I'm relying on my knowledge of it from a few years ago, but I remember pretty well. Yeah, so Zam, I don't think hidden powers as much. I know Gliscor is still a big deal, so I think nowadays if someone were to make a Mega Zam team, they might consider Ice on it. But especially because I don't think you really need Shadow Ball anymore, and I think like the extra hidden power coverage. In fact, I even like have this vague memory of a Psychic HP Ice Focus Blast recovers him. Although I think that might have been Auras. Yeah, so don't trust me on that one. But what I do remember is that some people used HP Ice Zard X because Lando. I mean, we already know Lando is going to do the same thing as the last two gens, but some Zard X's ran HP Ice for Lando, and that I thought was really that was just special, just precious. Speaking of HP Ice Charizard, Zard Y used HP Ice early Sun and Moon, sometimes for Zygarde, and hitting Garchomp was very cool as well. And I remember a couple games where Pelipper Rain was counter-teamed by HP Electric Zard Y, and that was just very amusing. Diancie, I remember, I don't know if, I feel like I only ever see Diancie's without hidden power in Sun and Moon, kind of like Alakazam. Because it has that instant speed, it doesn't need to Mega as much, and it can do things like Nature Power and Terrains, and you see it do things like Calm Mind a lot more, and not Rock Polish, Stealth Rock quite a bit. So that's not as much hidden power going on there. I do really enjoy HP Fire Ferrothorn in this gen. In other gens, it's a bad gimmick, but in Gen 7, then HP Fire Ferrothorn is genuinely good because you ruin Kartana. And Kartana is both a big enough threat and a common enough threat to where it is worth the move slot, you know, and because as long as you have spikes and a stab move and like knockoff, I generally like, then you're going to still be a good Ferrothorn in pretty much every game without Kartana. And when you do face Kartana, then you'll be so happy you have it. Even if you have you should have a Kartana answer anyway. It's not like Ferrothorn suddenly becomes your answer to Kartana Swords Dancing on the Switch, but it's still an incredible tool to have. So, Garchomp is not going to hidden power. Gliscor not really. Greninja, Protean Greninja for sure. Because especially, another big thing about Gen 7 hidden power is that you no longer have to sacrifice your IVs. So consider this Greninja, 31 IVs across the board. You give it hidden power fire because it uses that sometimes for Ferrothorn, and you boom. You have the 0 attack because you want the 0 attack, but everything you don't lose speed IVs. So now you can run perfect IV speed hidden power, which is or HP fire, which is amazing. You don't lose anything on your IVs anymore. So talk about making hidden power as good as possible. Thank God you can't Z with them. So yeah, Greninja generally doesn't it never HP fires on Battle Bond because I don't believe it can. I mean, generally using like specs unstabbed HP fire on things like Greninja, unevolved Greninja without such a huge special attack stat, generally not a good idea. Just spikes and muscle through with stabs, Ice Beam if you have spikes somewhere else, but. I would even prefer Gunk Shot because that at least KOs Bulu, but I still don't think it's good. But yeah, HP Fire on Protein Greninja is great because it has Stab without even being a Fire type. So no Stealth Rock weak, and you still get the benefit of Stab HP Fire. You even remove your you become resistant to the Power Whip that would otherwise take you out. And I mean, it's tough to fit, but that's because Greninja has incredible coverage anyway. And it also has used HP Grass on some occasions because you don't want to use Grass Knot unless you're using Bloom Doom, and that's generally overkill. And the reason you use HP Grass over Grass Knot is because Grass Knot does 0 damage to Rotom Wash, because Rotom Wash is really light, and Stab HP Grass is great, but Stab Grass Knot is also like fine, but HP Grass hits Rotom Wash much harder. So. And it's also what I this is like the coolest combination ever, but with the terrains, then hidden powers become even cooler. So, I've seen some like goofy stuff like HP Electric. This is not a standard, but HP Electric Volk in electric terrain. So you really rip through. I thought it was a Mantine counter team, I think, but you even rip through things like Heatran just by the sheer power. So offensive Heatran, obviously. But yeah, and a really cool one is HP Grass, Life Orb Greninja in grassy terrain. Life Orb Greninja in grassy terrain is amazing in general because you heal when you're not attacking, and even when you do attack, you lose 3% for Life Orb, which is awesome. And with HP Grass, then you even have the HP Grass become even stronger in addition to being stabbed. So I really love that combination. Yeah, Tapu Bulu just does beautiful things for its teammates. So yeah, HP Fire, HP Grass, but not HP Ghost, of course. So that's Greninja for you. Don't think I'm forgetting any other hidden powers there because it has such good coverage with everything else. Just want to make sure. And sadly, there's no hidden power Fairy, so it cannot destroy Como-O in one shot. But yeah, not a lot of else hidden powering, honestly, because Heatran shifted more towards Z exploding things like. Even if it's not using Inferno Overdrive, then like Corkscrew Crash for Megazam and Megalades and Assault T-Tar. But it's even used things like Black Hole Eclipse, which I really liked, for things like the Lotties again and like Slow Twins, Slow Bro mostly when that became popular, and even Reuniclus, which is kind of a pain. So yeah, Heatran became less about the hidden powers in this generation, much less in fact. Kartana, no. Keldeo, okay, Keldeo runs HP Poison, which is hilarious, because goodbye Bulu, goodbye Fini, which I just think is the funniest thing in the world. But yeah, Keldeo is not seen too commonly. Como doesn't really hidden power. I mean, Kieran Black, it's the same story. HP Fire sometimes, not always. Lando T, HP Ice, without messing up its IVs, it becomes even better. Latias and Megalatias and Megaladios, they can HP Fire without dropping their speed IV. It's so nice. No more trade-off in that regard. Magearna has run HP Fire on mostly on like the defensive sets. You don't really see like Shift Gear HP Fire because, again, incredible coverage and Z power. and Shift Gear and Calm Mind and Pain Split and all those things. But generally, like Assault Vest, like with Volt Switch and your Ice Beam or Floor Cannon, and then Iron Head. I mean, some people ran things like even Energy Ball when Gastrodon was really popular, which it really did become popular. But yeah, so HP Fire, just to keep Ferrothorn out of your face, is really, really good. Can you please play? All right. Oh, another reason, like Heatran doesn't even need to run HP Grass anymore because of Z moves. I should mention, because it doesn't need to run HP Grass when it can just run Solar Beam and Bloom Doom, and it can guarantee a trap on its target with Magma Storm. So, yeah. Z moves were really the megas. No, not the megas. The hidden power of Gen 7, but they're still hidden power. It's crazy. Magnazone is Magnazone, of course. Manaphy, not so much hidden power fire in this generation. Actually, very rarely. It was mostly being used on rain, so that was why. Not a lot of hidden power here. Not a lot of hidden power here. No more HP Fire Scizors. Superior can run HP Fire. Often didn't even need to. Just such a crazy Pokemon. I saw an HP Fire Scarm or two to handle Kartana. Kartana's crazy. Tangrowth can run HP Fire. Doesn't really need to. Bulu doesn't need to. Feeny doesn't need to. Coco, Ice. I mean, I've seen like Fire Coco and other like weird stuff, but to lure Ferrothorn, like Calm Mind, Dazzling Gleam, HP Fire with Fairy MZ. The combinations are really creative. I do enjoy that. But yeah, HP Ice Coco, of course, the standard because it's an electric type and being walled by Lando and Gliscor is just plain goofy. Lele, HP Fire, of course, Ferrothorn, Mega Scizor, just terrifying everything in sight. Lele's such a great Pokemon. And doesn't even need to drop its Speed IV. What a wonderful threat. Yeah, it doesn't really need to run any other hidden powers either, because well, first of all, it doesn't need to run HP Ice when it has A, Stab Moonblast, B, Psychic Terrain boosted Psychics, and it also has Thunderbolt, so yeah, what a Pokemon. Torn doesn't really hidden power as much in this gen. It's not as much about handling Gliscor with it anymore. Haven't really seen hidden power Pexes or T-Tars or Victinis, and of course HP Ground, Volcarona, but also HP Electric, and I think I saw HP Ice when Zygarde was around, but it was rare. Volk was like Heatran, more about the Z moves. And of course Zapdos once again. So we're just going to go through all the rest of them so make sure I'm not forgetting anything. I'm probably forgetting something very, very obvious, but it's not coming to mind. I mean, Thundurus on rare occasions, of course. Venusaur, of course, but it's just carrying over from Oris, really. I mean, Circuitry, again. HP Ice. Amoonguss, again, same deal. Especially because its coverage got accentuated by Stomping Tantrum, which was quite cool. And then, what, you have anything else, really, that needs to be mentioned? I mean, no, Hydreigon didn't really hidden power. And we're strictly talking OU here, so yeah, I think that's more or less it. Oh, Nihilego ran HP Ice. Well, the problem with Nihilego is it had to choose between HP Ice and HP Fire, and both of them were really tough because, choosing between being walled by something like Ferrothorn and Scizor, or Mega Scizor, obviously, or like Garchomp and Gliscor and Lando, it was kind of rough. I mean, you wouldn't get walled by them permanently, like especially not Lando, but it was definitely tough to break through them. So yeah, that was one of the many reasons why it fell out of OU, as cool as Nihilego is as a Pokemon. And yeah, I think that's basically it as far as OU is concerned. You don't really see these others much. Kyurem, I guess in Oris, Specs Kyurem ran HP Fire sometimes, just because it didn't really have much else to run, but that hasn't been seen for a long time. Oh, Mienshao ran HP Ice because it's a fighting type. I guess I missed that one in Gen 5. But it was it's a fighting type that has a huge special attack stat, so it has even less trouble HP Ice. It is way less trouble HP Icing than something like Terrakion, and it even has Grass Knot because why doesn't it? Why wouldn't it? So, yes, then all these are basically. I'm sure I'm missing something like underrated, but those were the big ones. So we're gonna call it there. So, because as we all know, in Generation 8. What's it called? Hidden Power was removed. So, that is an end. And I'm glad. Hidden Power is cool and all, but I sometimes feel like the we needed something to counteract the power creep levels. So, I mean, of course, there's going to be a little bit of a balancing problem if Gliscor ever shows up in Gen 8, because without HP Ice, it's going to be even more unmanageable. But that just might be a balancing problem on Gliscor's end, because Gliscor was already kind of stupid anyway. So, maybe we'll finally send Gliscor to Ubers. So, that's basically it, and we're going to wrap it up there. So, thank you guys for watching. I hope you enjoyed, and I will catch you next time.